Welcome everyone to This Month in Cyber for May of 2021. As we always mention, this has been going on for about 5 years or so, where each month we come together for about a half an hour to discuss events from the previous month and how they may be impactful to you. As a small or medium business organization, schools of all variety, everyone I think can learn from, others that other events that have been occurring and maybe digesting those and seeing how you're impacting that process internally for your organization. So obviously this month, it wouldn't be a month in cybersecurity without talking about the Colonial Pipeline. Probably won't be the last we hear about it, but a lot of news stories this month, but trying to just take some unique takes on it, some interesting tidbits for maybe those that hadn't heard or dove in deeper on that story, and what can we take away for it for our business. Also want to talk about a couple things. Exchange again this month has had some issues with regards to some patches that need to get applied, and I also kind of want to take it up a level and not just talking necessarily about Microsoft, but about patching in general and how it applies to vendors. Of course, I'd like to talk about how to simplify security, right? With all the vulnerabilities and supply chain attacks and dwell times and faster reverse engineering. How do we do this better, faster, cheaper? And then of course, it wouldn't be an agenda without an and more, right? Which gives me a lot of latitude to go anywhere we want. But try and keep this at about 20 minutes and leave some time for Q&A. So let's start with the pipeline story of the month. It's obviously the Colonial Pipeline breach that had occurred. Unless you were living under a rock, you likely heard a lot of the facts already. Friday, May 7th of this month, a few weeks back. An operator called Darkseid, which believes to operate out of Russia, attacked the biggest pipeline operator in the US, right? Operator that has 45% of the fuel consumed on the East Coast, 2.5 million barrels a day, plus 1 million barrels a day for New York alone. Some ransomware. And then the organization proactively took systems offline to contain the threat. Response team in general was FireEye was involved, who many of you may have heard of. Relatively expensive organization, but when you're not pumping 3.5 barrels of gas a day, you probably have some reserves of money, hopefully, to pay for FireEye or Mandiant, as they're often called. The U.S. government was involved, as you can imagine, the information security offices, the FBI, Department of Justice, State Department. And for a while, there was thoughts that they might have to do this the old way, right? Without a pipeline, at least in this business, you're trucking fuel. And if you can't go through a pipeline, then you can put it on a ship or you can put it on trucks. So they also thought, okay, well, we can use our strategic reserve. Unfortunately, the strategic reserve of gasoline in the East is 1 million barrels. And as I may have mentioned, this is 1 million barrels a day. So they had 1 day of strategic reserve. The tankers can take it up there. However, it takes 10 to 14 days to get it up there. Trucks can take it up there, but that's a lot of fuel. And right now, the roadways didn't allow for interstate transport of that type of fuel. So a lot of rules were relaxed and so forth in coming days, but in general, this was a big problem. IT 101, right? IT networks and operational networks are indeed supposed to be separate. And all of this occurred while the U.S. Congress was debating a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure plan. So a lot of things going on. This happened, of course, as I think I mentioned the date, May 7th, but just like all ransomwares, this occurred on a Friday, right? And there's logic to why things occur on Fridays. Memorial Day weekend is coming up next weekend, which is also another popular time, but in general, it would be no surprise. I think the only thing surprising here is the impact that this operation ended up having. So the player here was called Darkseid. They tend to have a Robin Hood type image. Meaning they advertise the fact that they steal from corporations and give a cut to charity, keeping a healthy portion for themselves, of course. They don't attack hospitals, nursing homes, education, or government targets. And they're trying to be the good guys, right? They're kind of a break off from an organization called Our Evil, which we've chatted about, I don't know, for the last year, it appears. They're oftentimes one of the more notorious ransomware gangs. They avoid the Soviet bloc nations and attacking them, so giving you thought as to where they could be from. And to date, they had obviously stolen millions and millions of dollars from Western countries, and in general, ransomware has stolen tens of billions of dollars from Western countries. The average ransom is $310,000. The average downtime at this point due to ransomware is 21 days. The frequency of ransomware in 2020 was up 300% from 2017 through 2019. And while this event was going on, just know that ransomware was going to many other organizations also, including Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was the 32nd state or local government hit yet this year with ransomware attack. So it's prevalent, it's out there, targets are getting bigger, badder, and again, some of the averages there hopefully are things that you can kind of take home and internalize. In this case, as is almost always the case now, this was another case of double extortion. There was data stolen, probably data on how much or how the operational plans were to pump oil across these states. Some of that data was published online in an attempt to extort the money. And then later on, obviously, they used the ransomware to extort money for the keys. We're fortunate in that there were no geopolitics theoretically involved, and they were just simply motivated by money in this case. Had it been geopolitics, this could have been, they could have, I don't know, misdirected the operational aspects, not just stopped the pumps, but similar to what they do in healthcare, which is try to alter the behavior of things. It would be similar to, I don't know, go back a long time as to how we, there were theoretically some centrifuges that were modified in Iran to stop their production of nuclear energy. In any case, this was simply a money grab, it appears, in the aftermath. A little bit about, so as the Department of Homeland Security looked and provided some alerts around it, this alert I think was dated back a little bit, but they have other alerts regarding this specific incident. The victims failed to implement robust segmentation, meaning they didn't keep their IT networks separate from their operational networks. They were using commodity ransomware, so this was not specially targeted ransomware or anything else. This could have been the Ryuk brand or other branding of ransomware that you see off the shelf. Obviously, sometimes they're modified somewhat, but they usually have a family associated to it, so nothing special necessarily about the ransomware here. This was only a single facility that was actually hit. There was one facility hit, and then again, the organization proactively took their network down in order to not cause stress on other and allow it to spread. At no time did the threat actor obtain the ability to control or manipulate operations. So that's an interesting after effect, and you kind of think about that and say, wow, that would have been really detrimental had they had control of servers. But indeed, it was just to stop the servers and from working and kind of put pressure on the customer. I think that's really about it on that story. Oh, I guess it's interesting to note their emergency response plan did not specifically consider the risk posed by cyber attacks. Didn't even think about it. is really another way to say about it. They absolutely thought about all the physical emergency scenarios. What happens if we have an earthquake, or what happens if a tornado comes through? Cybersecurity, I'm not too worried about that, right? And hopefully, that's not the case for your organization. They also cited gaps in security knowledge and the range of scenarios, obviously, that were possible. So a number of things kind of come out in the aftermath that I think are interesting. As kind of some updates to this, we do learn that a ransom was paid of approximately $5 million, which is relatively small by several standards today. We had I think Acer Computer paid $100 million recently. Apple was being asked to pay a bunch last month, and oftentimes we don't know whether ransoms were paid, but in this case, $5 million was identified. Darkseid, the operator, actually no longer exists. So they had existed for 8 months, and again with this charitable type image, and they no longer exist now. Who took them down? Not sure. All they said basically was, we got to pack our bags because our infrastructure was taken down. So maybe the U.S. retaliated, maybe Russia, maybe the our evil family that they were operators for may have said, hey, you crossed the line here in attacking something we really didn't want to attack. Yeah, you extracted $5 million and congrats, we're going to get a piece of that, but it wasn't worth the bad publicity we got. So they are interesting in the way that they operate. So not exactly sure who took them down, but their public infrastructure, their DNS servers, their payment server, and the blog, which had hosted all the stolen information, all of that was gone overnight. And so they decided to pack up shop, take their, I think they had gained 600 million over the eight months, and they'll probably be happily retired. Ironically, they also had a specialized cryptocurrency called, they used a tool called BitMix that was a mixing service to kind of anonymize even further than cryptocurrency does today, to kind of wash it or filter that data, and that has ceased operations too. So a number of things got attacked and by the good guys, and at this point, that organization ceases to exist. That kind of summarizes, I think some of the story there, and certainly we're going to chat probably just in larger context about ransomware and how to protect ourselves. But let's keep moving down the story. I think any story and any way that we try to protect from things like ransomware, I always like to ground ourselves in the NIST cybersecurity framework, which you probably see ad nauseum on screens for me, just because it's an easy way to discuss. And also the idea of protecting and protecting and protecting so that this never happens to you is not reality, right? Reality is it's going to happen to you, and I'll show you some statistics in a moment, but and when it does happen, whether it be ransomware or business email compromise or simply just a login and password that that gets out, you need to be able to detect it. You need to be able to have a response mechanism to it. And furthermore, if everything does hit the fan, you need to be able to recover. So let's kind of take a look at some of the things we can be doing relative to ransomware here. We have an entire ransomware guide that we've published, and certainly many times I've kind of dove into each of the areas that we think that you can do. We list some process and some technology, and certainly people are involved from a training perspective and security awareness, but there are a number of things that can be done to protect you and continue to make sure that your systems are up to date. I'm not going to go into them in detail now, but just know that they're out there, know that we're experts, if you will, at installing them, evaluating them, and recommending them if you're kind of in a situation where you just need to debate between should I be doing it this way or that way. One particular important area that we mentioned, this kind of falls more in the recovery space, but when you're protecting, you're backing things up. And I want to make sure that everyone's clear that backups are not truly protected until you use what we call the 3-2-1+1 strategy. 3-2-1 has been the common methodology for copies of data and things you see on the screen there. The +1, though, is really what has become critically important. Ransomware operators are first and foremost going after your ability to recover from the ransomware that they're about to inflict on you. Furthermore, at the time that they're debating that, they have already stolen your data. So data is stolen and ransomware is about to be enacted way down the pipe, right? It first kind of started in something called a kill chain, probably 30, 60, 90, 180 days prior. So it does take a little while to get this stuff up and running within your organization. You have some time. That's the good news at this point to uncover and mask things. That's why detection suddenly comes on to a new level of importance. But that level of protection and that offline copy is mucho importante, as they would say. All right, so we already talked about dwell time. So, outside of the protection realm, obviously detection, hopefully I'm highlighting to you how important that is. And then furthermore, your response. Your response should be trite. It should be thought through. It should be committed to paper. It should be known. It should be tested. Who are you going to call? Do you have a forensics team and retainer? Is your legal team equipped to handle this? What does your cyber insurance policy say? If you can't answer any of these questions, you're behind with regards to your incident response plan. What are you going to do personally? What do you know what you're going to do when an event occurs? And this event, let's say, was ransomware on all your servers. Who are you going to notify? Who's going to talk to the press? And what will you tell your customers? All of these things should be known, and if they're not known now, then they need to be fleshed out and committed to paper. Are you going to pay the ransom? And I guess all of these sort of things lead to, are you prepared if and when, and I say when in parentheses, ransomware occurs? So we've certainly developed pipelines to kind of, to checklists and so forth to evaluate incident response plans. We've developed them, we've tested them, and it is an ongoing process, but certainly an important process, counter to the idea of protecting from everything. All right, we're going to jump off the ransomware topic and just kind of move through some others that have occurred this month. So supply chain attack, SolarWinds was a very large and demonstrable supply chain attack where effectively code was manipulated, installation files were modified, and then it got installed onto a number of networks, a lot of important networks, as we kind of covered the SolarWinds story in the unfolding. They're not alone though. This past month, a developer called CodeDev had their bash uploader tool, which is used by hundreds of organizations, modified several months back. Hundreds of customers were impacted. The first customer to disclose was Monday.com, which is apparently a very popular site. It was the goal of the manipulation of code was to steal customer forms and data that was hosted on their platform. So those customers, that story is still unfolding, but that began to occur now. So if CodeDev has been part of your future, just know that supply chain attacks are becoming more popular. What software do you trust to put on your network? Oh, we also had a vulnerable Dell driver that put millions of systems at risk. And literally, I guess this month, personally, we saw a Unix server that was at one of our customers sending out hundreds of emails because it had been not patched properly. We had a wireless access point that was very recently that was attempting hundreds of logins. Again, due to some issues with the wireless access point itself. And then we also have this Dell Driver collection of actually 5 flaws. There's a CVE number associated with it, 21551. And goal of the issue is it will escalate privileges from non-admin user to kernel mode privileges. So pretty bad on the vulnerability scale, and a number of Dell servers that people have, we're looking, are going to need patching and updating. Some other further patching and updating from vendors. We put these out in our newsletter that hopefully you received. I point you to our website there with the Peters newsletters, where all of our former newsletters are stored, and we try to put generic information about vendor patch releases. But in the wireless department, independent of whether you have a Cisco, a Meraki, a Aruba, it doesn't seem to be very vendor agnostic. It's more of a TCP stack issue. There is some problems with CVE noted there and the references there, but it's a flaw in the standard that allows for encryption of the data payload, but not the MAC header. And if they read the MAC header, then they can get in and ultimately see and obfuscate the data that's transversing across a wireless network. So some bad stuff there for all wireless vendors, as we can tell. In some cases, you need to be on the network. In some cases, you can be outside internet facing to the wireless access point. Also, there was a Citrix update. Citrix Workspace app security is needed. There's some no CVs necessarily associated with that one, at least in my reference, but another update that was needed on the Citrix client. Which brings us to our Exchange friend. So in Exchange in March, they lit up a fire. If anyone remembers back, that was 2 months ago, but yet that was a major breach called the Hafnium breach. They told you to patch quickly. They really wanted you to patch in 2 days. Within 7 days, I think 50% essentially of the Exchange servers in the country got patched. Within 30 days, only 75% had been patched. So, we can't patch all the Exchange servers in the world or in the US in 30 days. And it leaves people highly vulnerable. So anyway, March was a disaster. A lot of systems not only needed the patches, but you had to look for breaches that had occurred because that was happening at such a quick speed. April, 4 critical patches came out for Exchange. They were handled as part of the normal updates, but they were ranked as critical, number 9 on a scale of 10, 9.6 on a scale of 10. And then in May here, we have an additional 4 patches. All 3 server varieties. It includes hybrid servers. It's coming out as part of normal patch cycle on May 11th. They're all level important, not critical this month at least. That's good. But it just seems that, patching equals security. Patching and patching now includes, all the devices that IT is responsible for, which has gone up. Mobile devices, phones, IoTs, cameras, wireless access points. So it's more encompassing and there's more load. Patching's challenging. The patches this month, if you don't run it as an admin from a command line, services don't start. There's third-party cookie issues. FreeBusies could break in hybrid scenarios. I mean, there's a fair amount to know. It's not just click a button. And then speed is of the essence. They're reverse engineering this stuff at record speed, and I've got I listed a story here. I won't go into a ton of detail about it, but they basically are within 5 minutes are going out and finding all the servers that have a vulnerability. So your patch policy of 1 day sounds great to an auditor, but it's still not fast enough to protect you. So your patch policy of 30 days, is passing muster, but the timeframes are just going down and down and down. So certainly check out the stories and evaluate for yourself as to where you want to be from a patching perspective, but it's getting challenging. From a timing perspective, we got about 5 minutes left. Security is getting more targeted. Obviously, a lot of information is moving to the cloud, and therefore a lot of security issues are going with the cloud, not necessarily with the systems themselves, but the targeting is going after your data. So as an example, one of the ways they're getting there is by using your identities and your well-created passwords, right, to get in there. there's some amazing statistics out there. Microsoft said every identity, 0.5% of all identities each month are hacked. That means 1% every 2 months, which means if you're a 100 user company, you have one account that's going to get hacked every month, every 2 months. So, if you're a couple hundred users, you're going to be expecting these compromises to occur. And in fact, this stat says something similar, right? 7 times a year, an account may go through some iterations. So this report is just identifying trends, and these trends are that they're really shooting for your data, trying to find the data, and trying to find a way in. And it's, even if you've offloaded this to cloud management, there still is an obligation on your part to manage the security for it outside of the base security for the operating systems and the uptime and things like that. That is Microsoft's responsibility, but you have a shared responsibility for twisting the dials and leveraging the tools that are available to you. And of course, they put this, and unfortunately, security becomes complicated though too. Here's an example where Microsoft put out Microsoft Cloud Security for Enterprise Architects. And this is a 11-page summary just of cloud security. And it's going to change either daily, weekly, or monthly with regards to how to architect the data. If you, as maybe one example of how it's complicated, this 11-page summary of security for cloud, just look at their Defender branding, right? There's Defender for Office 365, Defender for Endpoints, Defender for Identity, and that was meant to clarify how the different tools can be organized to protect your data. So it's complicated inside of a vendor, it's complicated across vendors, and certainly it's complicated by the very complexity of how you're chartered to protect against this data. So the good news is, though, I think you can start with just, what technology do you own? What prioritized issues do you have? And, what needs to be implemented? We certainly can help you prioritize some of those security solutions that need to be put in there. So again, just a reference to the Microsoft Cloud Security guide that came out this month too. All right, so to wrap it up, I think one of the ways that security complexity and urgency can be solved is through standardization. So NIST Cybersecurity Framework is certainly something that we lean upon. And secondly, I think that some solutions that we have in place help us uncover what we call the black box, right? All we really need to know out of your organization is number of users, devices, that includes switches and mobile devices and computers and servers, and kind of what flavor of numbers and quantities of those. And from there, we can kind of uncover what we think is a decent method for how to protect your environment through a number of processes that are in place. And again, some of this might be your responsibility, some of it could be our responsibility, but we can kind of walk through and help you unfold what your protection scheme looks like. And we're not designing for Fort Knox here. We can go to various levels in terms of your security maturity needs, but in the protection space, in the detect and respond space, and last but not least, obviously in the recovery space, we have solutions that we're familiar with that we have organized into packages for easy consumption, either through our managed services department, which is usually the preferred way to continue managing and nurturing and making sure that you don't have responsibility in that space, or as one-time projects through our project services also. Protect, detect, and respond, and recover. Those are the key aspects of the NIST cybersecurity framework, and it really keeps everyone grounded. So without further ado, we've got some blogs that we try to put up maybe 2 a week. Got a snippet of where they're at to just kind of, if you're looking for additional information on it. We have events that we're running. I would like to call to your attention the event, especially if you're a manufacturer or make any durable goods or services that you supply to the Department of Defense, or you supply to a supplier who may provide it to the Department of Defense. you are being asked to be part of CMMC, which is a security standard that began in January of this year. And it will impact all suppliers to the Department of Defense in the next 3 years at staging levels. And so a lot of organizations are starting now, and we're starting up a campaign to educate you about what that standard is and how you can kind of get started on your unfolding of CMMC standards for yourself. And with that, I will leave a minute or two for questions. I thought I would get through it quicker, but unfortunately, a lot more exciting material than I thought. So, okay, thanks all.